Hey guys, Minnie here. Welcome back to episode 7 of Return Trajectory. When we last left off, we had just dropped off 8 probes on minmus from the Morgas, the massive orbiter and seismic survey vessel. So what we're doing right now is getting our first probe from the, I believe it was the lowlands or the midlands, back up in orbit to rendezvous with the Morgas. Just doing a few inclination changes here. Going to get up to that close approach orange icon there and pretty much burn prograde until we get our encounter just like that. There we go. That's my method for getting easy docking. It's not very efficient, but with the amount of fuel we still have on these little guys, I really don't care, especially with the low gravity. Going to go ahead and switch to our next probe on the flats, one of the 3 biomes of flats. From the greater flats, just double checking the gravioli and seismic detectors, making sure we get the maximum amount of science, and just go ahead and lifting off from the surface just like the last one. You notice we still have about 30 something units of fuel, and our apoapsis is about 12 kilometers. So the next thing we do is target the Morgas, and we get a relatively close approach. So I went ahead and just played around with the advanced nav ball and didn't even bother with maneuver nodes and just tweaked it until I got a relatively close approach and switched out. You'll notice that my other probe is actually still in orbit. And we're launching a third one without even docking a single ship yet. We're just launching probes one after the other and getting encounters with the Morgas. Not very much fuel needed to get these into orbit. Not with that tiny little engine that they've got. Now we went ahead and switched back to our, I believe, to our second probe that we launched. Yes, this is the second probe that we launched, but it's the first one that had an encounter with the Morgas. So we're coming up to the Morgas right now, halting our relative velocity, closing up those landing gear, turning off the lights, and, just coming in on our final approach. Electricity is good. Monopropellant is fantastic. We've only used about maybe less than 6 monopropellant for this maneuver. Just decelerating right here. Folding up those solar panels. Activating the docking camera, getting aligned. And I had noticed just about here that, hey, you know what? If I want to actually dock all of these probes, I'm going to need to get rid of that fuel section. I was thinking of bringing it back, but I just go ahead and retro burn for a second, separated, switched to the RCS, and killed my relative velocity that was in the opposite direction to the station. And just pretty much burned back. Came in at about almost 10 meters a second and then did a braking burn right here. Flipped over to the other side. Switched back around. And targeted that docking port there. Or tried to. And switched over to fine control for the docking. And just coming in nice and slow. Getting that approach in. Docking, docking, docking. Come on, get in there. And then the Morgas started tipping over for some reason. I don't think the SAS was engaged on it. I didn't switch over to it when I came in. And I know I didn't turn off the SAS. And then, there we go. First docking in my series. We're meant to be together. Perform a docking maneuver in orbit. Switched off the docking camera. Got that thing back on that northern, basically that north marker. And got it aligned and got the SAS turned on. We're going to switch to that first probe that we launched. And just adjusting its orbit. Getting rid of that tank so we don't have to do it next to the Morgas. And we can use the RCS fuel that we have on board for all the orbital maneuvers that we need. And to get our intercept on that Morgas once again. Because we do want to dock. That's the whole point. So we're just coming in 15 meters a second relative velocity. Not very much to shave off. And we still have about 49 units of monopropellant. So, I mean, for very small probes like this, monopropellant is fantastic because there's so much stuff you can do with just fine maneuvers. And these probes weigh practically nothing. So we're just coming in on the Morgas, just like the other one, 2 meters a second. Coming in ever so slowly. Got that fine control on, getting ourselves oriented for docking. Got the docking cam up, just a small version. And coming in for the next docking. Just slipping into that little port next to those landing gear. And it didn't want to go in, so I switched to the Morgas and tilted it, and then it locked in. Don't know what the deal was, but we got everything attached, and it's all good. We're going to go ahead and switch out to that third probe that I launched. This one's still in orbit, so we did a deorbital burn on that last fuel section. Switching over to monopropellant. Turning the monopropellant on and getting really close to that liquid fuel stage, but it's not that big of a deal. And then I had to get my capture again with the Morgas, so I went and changed my inclination to match. And then just tweaked that close encounter on those orange markers. Came in at about 20 meters a second relative velocity, and then started adjusting my orbit. And just coming in on the Morgas, nice and gentle. 15 meters a second, a little bit faster than the other ones did. And we're closing up our panels right now, and I really need to start slowing down here. And I'm passing it, but I didn't want to, so I'm kind of burning and getting that retrograde marker lined up with the station. And I wasn't quite paying attention, and I got a little bit too close, and ding, just barely touched it there. But hey, no damage, yay! So we're gonna go ahead and select that damping, that docking node, and get ourselves adjusted. I still had my probe on basically aggressive control or normal control, not quite fine control at this point. So it was really twitchy. And this one, I thought it was misaligned, so I adjusted it that way, and I'm still drifting around, going forward, going up, going down, all over the place, and was able to get a docking with non-fine control and without the docking camera. So I can dock without the tools that I'm using. Same one on this one. This is that one that had landed on the ice leck and on the probes and on the slopes where those two flags were placed, where Jebediah Kerman was having some traction issues on the surface. Go ahead and adjusting our inclination, turning on our RCS to adjust our orbit just a little bit. Going to the apoapsis, burning prograde, ever so slightly, but not quite until we get into orbit. Separating that fuel station, or that fuel section, sorry, and getting into orbit. And then just using that RCS to get a close encounter. 0.1 kilometer, 0.2, 0.0, so we're practically going to hit the station if we come in. Switching over to target speed, relative, and coming in at about 20 meters a second. Coming into the Morgas. Very little I need to do here in the lines of adjusting my approach. Go ahead and switch to the heads-up display. You can actually see the Morgas and the camera coming up, as well as seeing the distance on the targeting reticle there, about 200 meters in closing. Just slowly coming in. Braking to 1.2 meters a second, so barely coming in at a crawl. Switching to the Morgas, we're going to give this guy a nice little area to dock in the light. Setting that Clampertron as a target, and just maneuvering over into place. Just like the last couple guys, we're on fine control this time. And popped into place. There we go. You got 4 probes docked, that's half of them. Switching to the next one, we're going to do an extremely different thing. Instead of orbiting all around the planet, we're just going to basically burn at the Morgas as fast as we can without doing an efficient orbit and get as close of an approach as we possibly can from the ground in a straight line. Once we get close, we're going to kill our relative velocity and attempt to match orbital velocities. So This I had never done before. It's totally viable on minmus. Is it fuel efficient? No. But these little guys have so much fuel and the gravity is so low, I really didn't care. So I'm just killing my relative velocity here, which is getting me into orbit. And then I killed my orbit here, separated that stage, switched to RCS, killed the relative velocity again, folded up my solar panels, and came in on approach. And I was like, well, that was nice. I didn't have to do very much orbital ballet there. Didn't have to swing around the planet at all. Just coming in on anything that's lit up. And aligning ourselves at that docking port. And the more gas started tilting again. Flipped over. And docked. There we go. Getting the more gas realigned. Our orbit is still relatively stable at 30 kilometers. We switch to our lesser flats probe. Same thing, checking the science. Targeting the more gas. It was right above us, so we did the same thing as the other one. And took off. Just straight at it. Since it was at a slight inclination, we just shot straight at it. And if you see that piece of debris off there to the right, that's about 13, 14 kilometers away, that is actually the jettisoned stage from the other ship that was falling away. So little time had been wasted that that piece of debris that I had ejected, the liquid fuel stage from the previous probe, was still on its descent, and we were able to see it from our approaching probe. So same thing as last time, just flying straight up to the more gas, killing our velocity, killing our orbit, separating our stage, turning on our RCS, killing our relative velocity versus the station, and basically getting back into orbit. Approaching the station at 2.2 meters a second, adjusting our approach just a bit, time warping, killing time warp, braking, selecting a target, turning on our docking cam, getting aligned, rotating, and just basically drifting in to dock. Very easy to dock, actually, with the laser docking cam. And once again, my Morgas was tilting. No idea why it keeps doing that, but it keeps doing it. Not a big deal. I can deal with a variety of issues while docking. Gonna realign the Morgas once again. Switch to our Great Flats probe. Gonna let the Morgas get a little bit more above us again and launch. Checking our gravioli data. You see that piece of debris that was kind of falling down there? That's another one of our pieces of probe debris that's on its way down. I probably should have turned on debris at this point. And this one we got down towards its inclination and then adjusted our orbit. And here I was trying to get a approach as soon as I could, and then just tweaking my orbit ever so slightly, burning up and down and all sorts of stuff to try to get a close approach. I ended up just ditching that stage and then going directly for my RCS stage to get back into orbit. Had to make sure I didn't hit it on the way up. Getting that close approach at about 300 meters or 0.3 kilometers. And coming in at about 2.9, 2.8 in towards the Morgas. We're going to go ahead and start killing our relative velocity. And braking. Next target selected. No docking cam. Oh wait, I did use it here. Not that I needed to. It's so easy to dock those little guys. And attach. Switch to our polar probe. This ought to be fun. Going from a polar inclination to docking at a pretty much 0-degree inclination. So I basically just burned towards the sun to make sure I had light the whole time. And then I burned towards the planet to get my orbit to get closer to the Morgas. Passed in front of me, and then I went ahead, changed my inclination here as much as I could. And it is eating up that liquid fuel. Ejected that stage, switching to RCS, to still have a full 50 units in. Getting up to the apoapsis, adjusting our orbit just a bit. That other piece is going to come down and hit the surface. And we're going to go ahead and match our inclination. Bam, there we go. Oh, almost. There we are. Next, we're going to get to that relatively close approach and retro burn until we get a nice close separation of 100 meters. And time warp around one more time. Come in on the more gas. 500, 400, 300, retro burning. Coming in at 4.1 meters a second. Folded up those solar panels. We've got plenty of power. 200 meters, and finding a probe section that we can dock to. This will be our last probe, so we saved the best for last. Definitely the hardest launch was to launch from the poles and get an intercept with our orbiting station, the Morgas. Switch to the docking cam. Get ourselves aligned. And docked. That is all 8 probes from the surface recovered. Sweet. Alright, next thing, let's get our return trajectory. So I'm not even bother with maneuver nodes here. Gonna turn on our engine and throttle up to head home. We had a bit of an encounter with the moon there. Didn't need to do that, so I didn't worry about it. 70, 60, 50, 40 kilometers. I didn't want to land on the dark side. I hate landing on the dark side of planets. So our periapsis is about 41 kilometers. We're going to swing in and hopefully go through a slight aerobraking maneuver. You did see that we had some Trinity debris there, but that isn't that big of a deal. It will deorbit eventually since it was at about 40 kilometers. And we're going to go ahead and point that heat shield towards the, oh, well, we lost one of our heat radiators, and, oh great, it's knocked off some of our panels. Fantastic. And there goes the other one. Those will decay in orbit eventually. So, there we go. One aerobrake maneuver, almost done. Our apoapsis stayed at about, well, we're going to go ahead and burn a little bit just to bring it down some more. $2.1 million kilometers. And we're running a little bit low on electricity here. I'm just using that engine to adjust our orbit. And fix our inclination. Periapsis is about 80 kilometers. That's above the atmosphere. I swing around to the backside, do a deorbital burn. We still have about 200 units of fuel, plus all that monopropellant. Plenty of maneuverability for orbital operations. Normally I would just come in and just let the atmosphere catch me and bring me down, but I wanted a nice daytime landing. So I got my periapsis to about 16 kilometers from orbit, got that sunrise. Coming in, go ahead and turn us around, get that heat shield pointed at the ground. Eject that last stage with the solar panels. And all those RCS engines worked pretty well. And I wanted to get out of the way of that back section in case it went a little bit faster than us, since it doesn't weigh quite as much. And just using the RCS a little bit to help keep us stable on the way down. I didn't want anything to overheat or blow up. Technically, what I really should have done is had the front section with the probe attached to it on the bottom with that heat shield, and that's where I should have had my probes and had the back section detach. So just a design oversight, because technically the plasma flames could have come around that heat shield, started damaging all those components behind it, But honestly, we weren't going terribly fast to get too much re-entry heat on the way in. You'll see that the ablative shielding on the top right is still being ablated away or eaten up. And we've got a little bit of re-entry heat here, but nothing as spectacular as, I was planning. But hey, you know what? Re-entry heat's re-entry heat, and it's eaten over half of that 3.5 meter shield. So we're going to go ahead and pop that one off. Decouple that one. What had happened here is the stage below that I just separated with those lights on it had gotten stuck on some of the gear, and I tried rotating and trying to get those spun out to where it let go, and it just was not cooperating. So using the gimbals and all that stuff, I kind of just tugged it out of the way and flopped around into it. Finally, let go. And I was like, yay, and I got rid of that. I probably should have done some more testing on this ship, but whatever. All the parachutes are deployed. We're going to have that primary drag chute deploy, and then we'll have 2 more chutes deployed at different altitude, and then 2 more chutes deployed at different altitude. I planned, if I was going to land on land, I had landing gear and landing lights. It was going to look all cool. So that's our drag chute deploying right there, coming in. Everything's looking great. And something happened right here. I don't know what, but apparently my video had glitched. Yet again. More technical difficulties, yay. More game freezing, yay. So, nothing to see here. Everything's going according to plan. Just pretend we landed safely. Because we totally did. Don't question me. Ever. So we got about 1559.2 science, bringing us up to about 1723 total. Let's go ahead and get into the science. And so we've got 1723, and the first thing I got was metamaterials because we got more station parts. And then I went to go ahead and got that last node for supersonic flight right here. And then the last thing I got was the composites for those KAS boxes and those smaller struts. Everything else is pretty much out of my price range right now, which means I'm going to have to do more missions on the next episode of Return Trajectory.